Thank you for those of you who stuck around. We have some very talkative speakers, it seems. So today I'm going to talk about Rube Goldberg APIs. And this is a subject that's pretty near and dear to me. We started a company around this kind of concept. So first, I'll talk a bit about what Rube Goldberg machines are. Here's a cartoon of one. They're a little bit silly, but the idea is through a bunch of chain reactions and events, in this case, a spoon, I believe. There's a parrot, all kinds of crazy stuff happens, chain reaction to have some sort of a result, which I think is a napkin on his mustache. So it's just kind of a silly, fun machine that is overly complicated. And I'm going to describe a bit about Zapier first, and then I'm going to show like a real-world example of what I mean by this. So Zapier is a company that does product integration. So we work with about 500 different APIs. We do hundreds of millions of API calls every day. And what's kind of interesting is we sit at the crossroads of all these different APIs. And we get to see a lot of really interesting things happening in the space. So the real-world example of a Rube Goldberg machine, this is based on a real user. I've kind of doctored it a bit so it would make a little more sense. But it's a restaurant, and it's a restaurant in America that is like a theme restaurant. And this is actually a real photo of it, and you can see this one's in Texas. You can see the cowboy hat. And what they do is pretty interesting. They have on their website, they have this form. In this case, it's a type form. And Typeform is a really cool piece of software. It just lets you create forms and then publish them. And what they were using was, it was a complaint form, it was a comments form, and the idea is whenever they got a submission, they'd get an email and they'd forward it to their managers. Basically, so everyone in all the different locations could get access to the sorts of things that are happening. That became a bit mundane, a lot of work, tedious to do this. So eventually they found us, and what they ended up doing was, instead of emailing every single thing individually every time it comes in, they dumped it into a spreadsheet. And the great thing about a spreadsheet, in this case Google Sheets, was that they could share this throughout their entire brand, all their different locations. So anyone could like take a look and see what sorts of things were happening at different locations. They could share it, they could work with it through there. And it looks something like this. It's just adding a new row every time a complaint or a comment came in. Then someone had the idea that, oh, we should add a checkbox that says, hey, if you are interested in any sort of daily deals that we're doing, we should like email them. So they set up MailChimp, and they strung this together. So after the row got added to the spreadsheet, the person got added to their mailing list, this case in MailChimp. And that looks a little bit something like this. You're just adding a new record to the mailing list. So after a while, they noticed that the people using the Google Sheets weren't necessarily checking them out every day. They were maybe checking every week, every month. So these were a bit delayed, so they thought, well, we should definitely alert people of this. So they hooked it up with Twilio, which is traditionally like a developer tool. But in this case, they just hooked it up to send an alert and send a text message saying, hey, there was a comment. So instead of everybody like checking their email, they just got a notification, and they customized this to say exactly what they wanted it to say. So just to kind of summarize, you have a form submission, which goes into a Google Sheet, adds a row. After that, it adds it to a MailChimp contact list. And after that, it sends this SMS to the people who are running the restaurants just to know that there's something there. So you have this kind of idea where the users can submit their information. It gets archived in a spreadsheet everyone can access. They get notifications, and also the people running the restaurants get notifications. And so there we have a Rube Goldberg example. And it's kind of cool because this person didn't develop this. They're not a programmer. They're not a coder. They're just a person that wanted to solve some small thing. They wanted to get their customer complaints moved into a sheet and let everyone know. And this is kind of what we created Zapier for. And the question we kind of asked ourselves is, where does it stop? At what point do people stop doing these sorts of things? And we were pretty surprised that it really doesn't. This user ended up going on to create a bunch more workflows that were using all kinds of different software that maybe they would have never had the reason to use as a restaurant, like Basecamp and some of these other different kind of special purpose tools. We noticed that people who do this are endlessly creative as well. They're doing things like Kindle uploads, automatic Kindle uploads from maybe Dropbox or Google Drive. We've seen complex Salesforce workflows where they design an entire workflow inside of Zapier. So there's a lot of really, really cool stuff that's happening in here, and it's all happening by people who don't know how to code but have kind of complex things that they want to work with. So I want to kind of dig into how it works a little bit. Behind the scenes, we're using APIs, which if you caught the title, would make sense. And APIs are really like astounding. This is a way for pretty much anyone to programmatically access all these different apps. And tons of services have them, and they're really exploding. And you don't have to just take my word for it. There's this great site called ProgrammableWeb that has the growth of APIs. So you can see from 2006 all the way to 2013, these are just public APIs that are available for anyone to consume and work with. They're really exploding. And this is really what's kind of powering this whole idea. And the trend, it's great for both customers and vendors. It gives you lots of opportunities to do customization. You can pull out your data, put in your data, so you're not kind of locked in. You have a lot of cool possibilities around what you want to do with the service. So I would say that it's probably a little bit better for vendors, so the companies that are making these APIs. And the reason that is it allows those companies to really focus on their core piece. So instead of building all these extra sort of wide features that kind of exist and kind of pollute the product, you can kind of ignore those. You can build that core experience and really focus in on it and not even worry about all the one-off requests. Because a lot of times you'll get these requests to add something to your app, and it might be the only person in the world that wants that. So you can just kind of ignore that and then focus on the core thing that's serving the bulk of your customers. So it lets you say no, but go check out our API. You can probably do something like this. I would say it's a little less great for your average customer. And I'm going to go back to our example so we can kind of illustrate that. This is the Typeform, Sheet, MailChimp, Twilio example. Now this is done iteratively. They didn't come in knowing they wanted to do anything with Twilio or knowing they wanted to do anything with MailChimp. They came in and they connected all these together piecemeal. As they discovered they had a need, they augmented it. But behind the scenes, it's pretty complicated. You have to know about all these different APIs. You have to be able to connect them all together. For example, this is just some snippets. You would get the data from Typeform, you would post that to Sheets, and then you would post that to MailChimp, and then finally post that to Twilio. But you have to do all of these particular things. And that's not even it. The mountain goes even further. The data that you get back from Typeform is absolutely not the same data that you're going to get from spreadsheets. So you have to completely reformat that data. It's also not the same format that you would get from MailChimp, and it's definitely not the same format you would have to send an SMS. So you have to like completely rework the data that comes across. And that's not even it. On top of that, you have to handle authentication. Everyone does a little bit different. There's OAuth, there's basic, there's so many different types of authentication. You have to parse out the content. It might be JSON, it might be XML. Many different ways to do this. Deduplication is also a tricky thing. You don't want to do the same thing twice. You don't want to send hundreds of alerts for the same person that submitted the form. So you have to be smart about this. That means you have to have a database tracking it and figure out all the differences. You need error handling, so when this stuff breaks, you actually know that it broke, so you can fix it. So you can't just be like, why did no one get their notifications for the past couple of days? You have to know why this happened. And then also, there's filtering. So extra business logic, you may not want to add that person to your mailing list if they had a complaint. So you might want to filter those people out. So there's a lot more things kind of going on behind the scenes to make this really reliable. And if you don't do it, it can bite you and it can really be a painful experience. So really, I guess the question is, are you a developer? All that stuff, does that sound like fun and something you want to do? And usually the answer is no. That's a little bit tricky to like add all that stuff, learn all that stuff. And even if you are a company that has a lot of developers on hand, it's maybe not the number one thing that they should be working on. Maybe they're building stuff for their core product. Maybe they're doing something else, right? Some small workflow may not be the number one priority in your company, so you may not get that developer time. So just kind of reiterate the break between developers and non-developers. That little sliver right there is developers. So this is the part of the world that can actually jump in and do these sorts of things. On the flip side, you have the other 7.2 billion people in the world that can't do these. They need tools to let them dive in and do something complex with an API. So that's basically what I'm talking about. Customers need easier ways to consume these APIs. And I'll even rewind it and show you kind of how we're going about it. That example that we had, Typeform to Sheets to MailChimp to Twilio, we really want to build a UI on top of that. Make this really, really simple for anyone to just hop in, and you can even see that there's little plus actions in between them. So you can add another step between it. You can add something else. You could delete one. You can readjust. If you find out that Twilio isn't the service for you, you can swap that out with something else. If you want to send an email instead of an SMS, you can swap that out with Gmail. So you get a lot of this flexibility that you might only get if you were a developer. We're trying to put it into the UX, into the design that anyone can really use. And really, we're trying to move all the way down the continuum for programming languages, where you have, punching in punch cards to assembly language to C to Python. All these move up the abstraction continuum. And at the very far end, we like our system to kind of sit to let people do sort of complex things without needing to code, right? You just hop in, you drop stuff where you want it. And we even let you get like nitty gritty. So like deep down under the hood, you can kind of see that there's different ways to do this. So you can actually define your entire message by using snippets of data that came from the previous part, right? So you can reformat that data, and it makes a little more sense, right? So we let you like dive really, really far in there. And I do want to finish up with one more example, and then everybody can get to lunch. The final example, this is really cool. I found out about this just last week, and I was like, seriously, someone's doing this? This is pretty impressive. So this gentleman created an automated custom video that got emailed after you filled out his contact form. You can actually go visit his site, bartatwork.com. And he does a lot of interactive videos. And whenever you fill out his contact form, he will send you a custom real video, like an MP4, link to an MP4 that has your name encoded into the video. So it's really, really cool. And this is how he does it. He starts with the Gravity form on a WordPress site. So he's just using a WordPress site with a plugin. That triggers a form submission that creates a plain text file in Google Drive. Now the Google Drive file or folder is synced to his fleet of Mac Pros, and I actually have video evidence of this here. You can see in the bottom right, or the right side here, that's his fleet of Mac Pros. They're all just networked together, and he's running software on it that he's familiar with because he's a video editor. So Adobe Premiere watches those folders, and whenever it sees a new one, it uses that data in the video. It just uses it through kind of an automated mechanism that he has set up. And it gets synced, the rendered video gets synced to another folder, different folder in Google Drive. So that gets synced back to this service, and that video is uploaded to Wistia, which gives you lots of like analytics and personal information about how people are watching your videos. So it gets added there, so we can find out if people are actually watching them when he sends them. When that's complete, that shareable URL that you can kind of share that points to Wistia goes into a Google Sheet, which finally gets emailed to the user. So this entire thing takes just a couple minutes, and he has it set up to where anyone can fill out a form, and within a few minutes, they're going to get a customized video render in their mailbox, which is really impressive, and that's helped him get a lot of business. So to kind of wrap it up, there's real value in mashing up APIs for non-developers. There's a ton of functionality under the hood here, and it's really not accessible to people who don't know how to code, usually. So what we want to do is create those tools. What we want to do is let them tinker. So, all right, I finished that. Hopefully a little bit quick. Everyone can go get lunch.